Friends, fans, and fine folk, grab your drinks and snacks and come on down round the campfire for this short rest with me and my friend Damon from formerly Feral Games. Beer, 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 beer. How are you doing, Damon? Hello, hello,
Well, how are
indeed.
you today?
I am doing very well. Well, I'm not. I'm doing better than I was. It's all relative, isn't it? How is
Yeah,
one
better is
doing?
good. Better is good.
As you can probably tell, I'm a little bit sick. I have got the Pax Pox, the Con Crud, the any of the clever names that people have come up with it over the years of
Yeah,
the convention nesties. Yeah, I was kind of fighting illness already. Like, when you get to a point where you're just like super busy, there's just too much going on. You've got deadlines, you've got things to do, and you can feel something happening because you've not been taking care of your body. And you're like, nope, not getting sick now. And just by sheer stubbornness, you you intimidate the bugs into not taking hold. Yeah, it
yeah,
was it was very
yeah.
much
I've been there many times. I feel that.
it was very much that for like the week leading up to PAX Australia. I was like, I've got way too much to be preparing for PAX Oz because I stupidly agreed to being on 5 panels over the 3 day week, 3 day weekend. So yeah, not great. And then while I was at PAX, it all just kind of took over and hit me. And then oh well. Now I'm in Perth at the Winter's Tales studio, and I've got a little time to chill out and relax
Great.
and get better again
That's
before it
good.
all kicks off again at the end of October.
Yeah, yeah.
It comes in waves. So welcome in. It's great to have you here. So yeah, we met at Gen Con, and we met through a mutual friend, Sarah Moore, or Pixies and Pins. She
Yeah.
introduced us to the game that you're working on that we'll talk a lot about over the next 2 hours. So buckle in, everybody. Um, you tell me though. You tell me where people can find you first. Like what? Tell me a little bit about you. An introduction, like an elevator pitch of
Yeah.
who you are.
Who I am? Well, my name is Damon Van He. I am pretty bad at the internet, to be fair. Sarah, in fact, helps me out a lot with that. So she's usually the one you're talking to. But if you're looking for formerly Feral Games, you can find us on Twitter at formerly underscore Feral. We're on Blue Sky at formerly Feral Games and all the things and et cetera, et cetera. And then there's just our website, formerlyferalgames.com. But I myself have been. This is the first game that I have designed in total, like from the ground up, and tried to sell and everything. But I've been gaming for ever and ever and ever. But first
And what
time,
is
and
this?
Sarah, in fact,
And what
pushed
and what is
for this to become a thing.
and what is this game that we're talking about?
Yeah,
Give
so
us the
this
elevator
is
pitch of the crown.
it's The Crowned. So it is a game where you get to play gods of anything you want. You pick a thing, you are the god of that, and then you have like total control over that over the course of the game. And it's surprisingly successful, given that that is the premise for it, I think.
Surprising. Yeah,
Um,
yeah. You give that to as a premise to somebody who has been burned before with various different TTRPGs and things, and they might be a bit cynical about it. They might be like, "Oh God, the power creep on that's going to be insane. Like balancing, it's not going to work, and
yeah.
you're going to get some like real optimizers or min maxers, and they're going to ruin it for the people who are more role play and stuff." But having played this game at Gen Con, having played a one shot of the game, it was incredible. Very well designed. The layout is beautiful,
Thank you.
and it's balanced in such a way that, as you say often, you could play in a party where one of you is a god of bubblegum, and another one is the god of volcanoes and natural disasters and all things dangerous, and you'd feel balanced. You'd feel equally powerful. And I
Yeah,
think that's a very
absolutely. That was
clever design.
definitely. Yeah, thank you. That was one of the main goals when we set out to make it was to just give the players as much freedom in the game as possible. Like I always play in any game that I'm playing, I try and play like a weird little dude all the time. I want the strangest thing. I want the classes that don't make sense. I want the skill choices that like go against expectation and everything like that. And so I just want to play something very thematic and very weird. And a lot of games don't support that. So I really I set out to make a game that I thought I would have a lot of fun playing.
Hmm.
And I think that I nailed that. I mean, I really enjoy it.
Yeah,
But yeah, you can just it's all about player agency and expressing your imagination and creativity and just like really digging into what does it mean to be a god of something, of whatever it is that you want to be. Um,
yeah.
yeah, that's the game. That's the game in a nutshell.
Is the game in a nutshell. Well, wonderful. We'll get a lot more into it as we go. But first, I want to talk about the company that is designing and creating and publishing this thing, formerly Feral Games. Let's talk about where the origins of that and where the name came from.
All right. Well, it's sad. So everyone
It's a
get
sad
ready
story.
to
Get
to be
your
sad.
get
It
your
is sad.
get
Um
your
yeah,
tissues.
so and it's a little meandering, but it's okay. It's worth it. So my wife and I bought the house that we are in about 5 years ago, and the day we showed up to look at the house, there was a cat sitting in the front yard. It was this big like chonky tomcat, all tore up, bent ear, like patches of fur gone, just like a real hard tomcat. Um,
It's got like
and
love
we
and
moved.
hate tattooed on its knuckles.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. We moved in, and it just like we would see the cat in the neighborhood all the time, and like the cat just controlled the neighborhood. It just had this presence
He was
about
the
him,
Don.
like yes,
If, you,
squirrels
if
and
any
birds
other
would run, other cats would
yeah,
run.
if any other cat
Like
wants to move into this turf, they have to run it by this cat first.
yeah, he would like lay down in the street in an intersection and for a bath, and cars would just stop and then like slowly creep around him and everything. And we ended up naming him Omar after Omar Little from The Wire.
Okay.
If you're familiar with that show at all, because Omar coming, and then all everyone
Yeah,
else
yeah,
in the
yeah.
neighborhood would
Everybody
just
else. Yeah,
scatter as he came
makes
walking down the
sense.
street. And we started putting food out and everything, and eventually this cat just sort of became a staple in our lives, wandering around and like showing up in the morning and hunting rats and catching birds and just generally being lazy in our yard. And then one day he got a hurt paw, so we trapped him and we took him to this nonprofit here in Seattle called the Alley Cat Project, where they do free spay and neuters and vet care for animals, and then release them back into their neighborhoods. So
Yeah.
they got him fixed, got his paw fixed up, and then we released him. Thought he would never come back. He was gone for about a month, but then he finally showed up again. And then time passed. It was great watching him, and eventually he started getting really sick, and he moved into a box of clothing on our porch. And so once that happened, and like winter was coming up, we brought him inside. We've got two other cats. We've got Bengals, and we were very nervous about how they were going to get along because our Bengals
Mm.
are just crazy. Um, but we brought him in, and he had an enlarged heart and a bunch of fluid on his lungs and everything, and we took him to our vet. Our vet didn't think he was going to last very long, but we put him on some medication anyways, and we're like, maybe we'll just kind of help him feel comfortable. And then we had 2 years with him.
Wow.
We had 2 years of him being the sweetest, most cuddly, least feral cat we had ever seen in our lives. And it turns
Wow.
out he had been in the neighborhood for about 10 years, just
Wow.
wandering around, which is just unheard of for a Tom. But he would sit on my chest while I would write. I would lay on the couch, and he would come and sit on my chest or on my knees, and I would have to like place my laptop around him and do my best to type around wherever he was. And so he was with me for most of the time that I was writing the early stages of this game.
Wow.
And then just over 2 years ago, he threw a blood clot, and we took him in, and that was it.
That
It was a
was it.
real sudden thing at the end of a very nice day. In retrospect, he had a great day, and it was just like it was so wonderful to get those 2 years that we had that nobody thought he would last.
No.
He was doing pretty bad, but the medicine really worked for him, and it was just a great cat. And so because he spent so much time, like that was where we got the name. We were always calling him formerly feral after we brought him indoors. Just all of our hashtags for pictures of him online and stuff like that. We got formerly feral, so that's
Formerly
where
feral.
the name formerly feral games came from, and that is in fact
Nice.
an illustration of him in the logo
This is
there
him.
as well.
Yeah, nice. with his little venti
Yeah,
ear
that's
over. I
Omar.
like that.
So that's a
And
really long story, but that's where
hey,
it came
no,
from.
it's a very happy story actually. I was expecting sadder. Obviously we lost him in the
Oh,
end,
all right.
but
Yeah.
I still feel like that's a happy story. Like you saved him from a life of being feral and having to wander the streets and find food elsewhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, it
and he
was
had a
good.
lovely
It
last
was
couple
good
of
having
years.
him around. Yeah. Yeah, it was really good having him around. And he like as just after he passed, then like all the raccoons came back to the yard. We
They
didn't
were
really
all
have
like,
raccoons
"Have you
while
heard?
he was
Have
around.
you heard Omar's passed? There
Yeah.
was a power vacuum now. I heard he went soft in his last years."
Yeah, absolutely. Just became a pillow cat next to the window. Never tried to get out or anything. It was just real chill.
Are there any public images of him anywhere that people could
Yeah,
find
there's
him?
there's a lot. Yeah. Let's see. There are let me look it up. I don't know the handle off the
I just
top of my
know
head.
that I would be doing my community a disservice if I didn't ask where people can see this pretty boy.
I understand. Yeah, there's a so there's an Instagram account. It's Caspin underscore and underscore Jaga, which are the two names of our Bengals.
Oh.
That's Caspin, and then Jaga is Jaga. They're named after Thundercats. Um, but that Instagram account is just where I occasionally drop pictures of my cats if anybody wants. And there's a ton of Omar up there. So
There you go then. If you want to see the inspiration for Formerly Feral games, Casman and Jagger. Thank you, Pixies and Pins. So,
oh, did she drop it in there?
I should drop the at, yeah.
Thanks.
So that's where the name came from. You decided to name the company. And what is the sort of extent of Formerly Feral Games now? Like how many people are under that banner? Is it just you? Is it you and a couple of designers? Is it
It's mostly me and Sarah.
yeah,
We do most of the design work. I do the bulk of the writing. But then we also have for the crown specifically. In total, it's a team of five. We've got Tanel Lovett doing art. We've got Sarah's partner Jeff doing our layouts, and then my sister did all of our edits. She's an editor. So
right? That's
but that's
pretty
the
handy.
entire team building the crown. It's just five people. We've got one artist cover to cover, one writer, everything like that. So
It's amazing the amount of work that must have gone into that, and for it to only be five people working on it. It's
yeah,
Formerly Feral.
it was a lot.
bef- So before the Crown, was it anything, or is Crown like the very first thing that Formerly Feral has ever worked on?
Correct. Yeah, first thing that Formerly Feral has ever worked on. So it's our first project ever. You know, we made it because we needed a name for the business license in order to do taxes properly. So
Right, that makes sense. That makes sense. And where did the idea for the Crown come from then? Has it been something that's been percolating for years, like before you actually sat down to start writing it?
yeah, it has been. It originally started as a NaNoWriMo project that I was working on, which is the National November Writing Month,
Ah, right, yeah.
where you sit down for November and you try to write a 50,000 word novel, which is like 1,300 words a day, somewhere in there.
Mm,
Um, and so I tried that out. And it turned out that I was not a super great novelist, but it was a lot of really good world building. And the whole time that I was writing, and I got to, I think, 85,000 words. I got to the 50 in November and then kept going afterwards because I was trying to actually like make a book out of it, make a novel out of it. Um, and the whole time I was writing, I just wanted to play games in the
right, yeah,
world that I was writing. I was like, this is
yeah.
just too cool to just be a book. And so then that percolated for a little bit, and I kind of started kicking around the idea of trying to make it at the very least like a game setting out of it. I wasn't sure what system I would use to run it, but I started writing rules and setting based rules, I should say, not mechanics quite yet, but
Yeah,
specific setting rules. Um, and then COVID started.
right,
So my D&D team is very uh, uh, like battle mat heavy. We're all into the
right.
miniatures and everything like that, which became much harder to do.
Yeah.
So I said to them, I was like, well, I have this thing I've been kicking around. Let me see if I can find a system to run it through. Um, and I started in one system and didn't really like it, and shifted to another system, didn't really like it, and but we still ended up playing the game with some very patient players as I changed things along the way, for about 18 months. And then by the end of it, I had just a whole stack of mechanics written as I was just writing as I went. So at
Right.
the end of that, I was like, well, this should probably be something real, I guess. And then Sarah Moore really pushed for that to exist as an actual thing, because I was kind of on the fence about, whether or not it was good enough and whether or not people would be interested in it and everything. Um, but that's kind of where it meandered through to get to where it's at today.
Sarah strikes me as the sort of person who is definitely going to be good for motivating you to put your creative ideas into play. To be like, it is good enough, and people will like it, and you should do this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of her jam. She's really good about that. Everybody needs a Sarah. Everybody should have a
It's
Sarah.
really neat to Sarah. How did you meet Sarah? How did you get to know her in the first place?
I met Sarah at Gen Con, also, not this Gen Con. This Gen Con, boy, 10 years ago, maybe 11, something like that. I was there I worked in the film industry for 15 years as a special effects makeup artist and prop builder.
Wow.
Um, so I was at Gen Con working on a project for Zombie Orpheus Entertainment, who did The Gamers and Darkness Rising and Journey Quest and
Right,
and
right, right.
those films, if you're familiar.
Uh-huh.
And we were shooting some of our stuff at Gen Con, and so I was there with that. And Sarah was there because, she's Chicago based, which isn't too far out from Gen Con.
Hmm.
And she was there with her own IP and everything. And yeah, we met there and just have stayed connected ever since. And then, well, I was about to say more recently, but that's not even true because this has been like another 8 or 9 years of work. We've been working on Chaldea, which is Peter Atkinson's
Hmm.
extended project that he loves to make, and I've worked with him on everything that he has filmed before. That was how I met him here in Seattle, was through the film industry.
Right.
And so he's made a bunch of things in that world. And Sarah works with him as well. So we
Yeah.
were have been able over the years to, stay connected through a number of ways. It's been really great.
Awesome. That sounds yeah, it sounds like it's just one of those things where it's like you're kind of just in each other's periphery for so long that it just like meshes together and you find your people and you go, I like that one. I'm gonna keep this one around.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is one that's
She's a
gonna
good
stick in
one.
my life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the idea for the crown started from well, the mechanics of the crown started from necessity of trying to find something to run for the D&D group, as it were, during COVID. But the idea for the crown, like the original like impetus for wanting to play something like you that came from the novel, the novel that you were writing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what made the idea for that? Like keep pushing the goalpost backwards further and further into the past. Like what when you sat down to do your Nano, was it called the November of something writing something
Yeah. NaNoWriMo.
NaNoWriMo?
Um,
You must have had like an impulse of like I want to write about gods or something.
yeah, I actually know where the very first, like, the origin
Spark came
point
from.
is.
Oh wow,
I've got
that's
that.
very rare.
I've got that. I was waiting for the bus, and I had my headphones in, and I was listening to Hoosier. And there's a line in one of his songs where he's talking about the angel of small death and the cocaine scene. And so I was that got me thinking about, like, angels having, like, purviews that they would have, control over. So small death and cocaine was this particular angel, and that was the thing that led me to the thing that led me to the thing, and
Oh wow,
eventually
oh
got
wow.
into, yeah. So that was the moment. I still remember it, like, totally clear.
I'm
That
just
was gearing
thinking
up for
like
my
imagine
first.
being an angel where you are only the angel of small death and cocaine.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the point that it began.
That's very cool. I like that because very rare do these things happen because things are inspired in like the subconscious before they hit the conscious usually, and like you've just it's kind of just like the various different media you've been growing up with kind of just shapes the direction of things
Mhm.
you're interested in general. It's rare that people can point to the specific moment of a spark of insight or inspiration.
Yeah, well, and I mean, there's definitely like a ton of media that drove me there already. Basically everything Neil Gaiman has ever touched.
Right, yeah.
American Gods and Sandman and
Sandman, yeah.
all of that stuff and even like Weiss and Hickman's like the Deathgate cycle, I think it is. That's the one
Right,
that's where there's like personifications of time and death and they all have their own
right,
books
yeah.
and that and me just like really enjoying playing themed characters
Mm,
leaned into it really hard. And I've also just I have gamed forever and read comic books forever. So like it's very easy to draw parallels between like the Crown and the X-Men, for example.
right, yeah, yeah, yeah.
like like
Everybody's got
Iceman in the
a
Crown
power
would just
or a
be the
thing.
god of ice and he
The
can
God of
just
Ice,
do ice
yeah.
things you know
Yeah, for sure.
so yeah, there's definitely
Yeah,
like
I've always
like
liked that kind of
the
idea of
foundation
the
is there, yeah.
ensemble powers, yeah. I've always been drawn to things. I think that's why the X-Men work so well because every one of them has like a thing they can do, but there's everything else they're kind of crappy. Like everything outside of the thing that they do as well. Whereas like somewhat like the Justice League never really interested me so much because like Superman is just he's just kind of it's like when you're a child and you're playing like make believe with your friends and you've got that one annoying friend who just hates to lose so much that it's like I'm bulletproof. It's like well I'm gonna hit you with ice. I'm ice proof as well. It's, Superman's just like
Yeah,
invincible to everything, and especially in whichever crappy movie it was where he like lifts like the one thing Superman's got as a weakness is kryptonite, and then in one of the movies somebody throws like a mountain of kryptonite at him and he just lifts it up and throws it into space or whatever. Um, so
yeah,
at that point you're just like, well, what's the point? I remember watching Man of Steel and the fight. There's like a huge, big, drawn-out fight towards the end of that movie with General Zod or whatever his name is, and they're just two immortals that are just fighting, and there was no stakes to it because I'm like, neither of them can die because they're both
right.
immortal and they're both superhuman powered, and they're just smashing up a city and like the power creep. You can look at every individual minute of that fight and go, well, the designers had to like ramp it up. So instead, they start off throwing punches, and then they start throwing rocks. And then they move to throwing cars at each other, and then at some point they're throwing satellites at each other. They just keep moving the fight, and none of it had any stakes for me because there's just no weaknesses, and Superman can do it all. He's like a one man band, as it were. Whereas
Yeah,
I seemingly like you, I've always been drawn to stories where it's like, no, this guy's really good at this one thing. This guy's an incredible archer, and this guy's got ice powers, and this guy's really good with fire. And for that similar reason, I guess I've always been fascinated with like the Greek pantheon of gods and just pantheonic gods anyway. Like I'm not interested in cultures that have like a monotheistic god necessarily because
mm,
it's kind of like the Superman thing. Oh, that god can do everything. I much prefer like when you look at an entire like gods that are like, oh, I'm the god of stubbing your toe. That's all I've
yeah,
got. And so when I heard about this system and when Sarah invited me to play, I was like, yeah, hell yeah, I want to get in on that. I want to discover what god I come up with during the creation process. So once you had the idea and once you started like writing it, you had your setting coming. You tried a few different settings out, a few different systems out, and did you keep anything from those systems when you then made a system, an entirely new system for yourself, or did you like you just used inspiration rather than keeping individual elements of the systems?
yeah. All the mechanics for the Crown are new.
Yeah,
There's definitely inspiration that's come from like a number of different games. Certainly, it's a dice pool system. I played a lot of World of Darkness in the '90s, a lot of Vampire and Mage the Ascension and stuff like that. So that whole like stat plus skill
yeah,
kind of dice pool making thing.
yeah.
Um, but it's the nature of being able to have the potential to do anything that you want on a
Mm,
divine level meant that the rules just needed to be built kind of from the ground up. Like
Yeah.
even some of the other games where you're effectively playing a divine character, whether you're playing like Amber or Nobilis or any of those games, like it still felt too restrictive. Even many of the supers games that I've played have still felt too restrictive for just being able to do whatever would make sense
Anything.
for your
Yeah, you
character
are
to
a
do.
god. You should be able to
But
do anything.
you should be able to do anything within your purview.
Yeah,
Like if you are the god of gorillas, you can do gorilla things. That's it. That's the
that's
rule.
it.
You can do gorilla
You
things
can
then.
do any
You
gorilla
know,
thing.
but then we had to find some way to balance that, because you can't just say narratively you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
um but so mechanically, uh we came up with your aether pool, which is a resource that you gain daily based on a number of factors, like how many followers you have and things like
Yeah.
that. And these are points that you then spend to do all of your god stuff. All of your divine spells, which we call rotes, a bunch of wonders that are kind of like the wonders in the crown are like everything about your character that isn't the thing you are the god of. So like
Mm.
all of your gear, all of your magic stuff, your stunts, like any kind of special abilities that you can do, if you can fly or hover or whatever, like all those are considered wonders in the game. Some of those require these aether points to activate. And aether also doubles as your health points, so it really becomes a game of resource management.
Mm.
Aether coming in, aether going out, and trying to maintain your divinity for as long as you can.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful way of doing it as well. Like having that pool that can be affected by the character build. Like when you're creating the character, you can choose to take oh, I'm going to take a sanctuary somewhere. And by doing so, as long as I visit that sanctuary or spend some time there once a month or whatever, then I can add an extra this amount to my Aether pool,
Mm.
which is, your health and your abilities to do powers. I think the building of how you do your rotes is a very clever mechanic. Could you tell us, just like walk us through that for the people who haven't actually played it? How does it work? Because obviously it came from a
Yeah,
place of in D&D you've got 600 different spells you could do, but each one can do like a thing, and it says in the stat block what it can do. And if you're the god of if you're designing a system where you could be the god of literally anything, how could you have possibly made each spell to do everything that everybody possibly wants it to do?
yeah,
So you
absolutely.
couldn't, yeah,
So
you couldn't have had like a spell list for this game.
yeah, it would be impossible to do anything like that. So many of the rules are flexible, and I mean barely even rules. Because the players should be able to be as flexible as possible with everything they can do.
Mm,
And the core of that really is our rote system. So like if you think of like a take fireball from D&D, it's got a range on it, it's got a damage that it does, it's got how long it takes you to cast the spell, everything like that.
it's got like a
We
radius that it
have
affects. Yeah.
area of effect, yeah, all of that stuff. We took all of those individual parameters, which we call degrees, and you build your rote in the moment by assigning values to those degrees. So if you wanted to build a fire, if you were the god of fire and you wanted to do a fireball in the ground, you would decide how long the fireball lasts, how far you want to throw it, damage, all of those things. There
Like
are
the
eight
radius of it. Yeah,
degrees
like so
in
if
the
you wanted to
game.
build if you
Yeah.
wanted to build the actual fireball spell in D&D and recreate it in the crown, you'd
Mm.
you'd choose your duration to just be an instantaneous explosion. You'd choose
Yep.
the range to be 120 feet or whatever fireball is. You'd choose the scope, I think you call that, isn't it? Like how
Yep.
how
Scope.
much it
Hmm.
affects. And then you choose how damaging it is. And then in that way you could be like, oh, I want to kind of save a bit of my Aether by creating. I don't need the fireball to be 20 feet large. Everybody I'm trying to hit is within 10 feet of each other. So you make it a slightly smaller scope and save a bit of Aether.
and
And
and save
you,
some aether, exactly.
yeah. And vice versa, you can be like, okay, I've got like an entire battalion to attack on the battlefield. I'm gonna really ramp up that scope, spend way more Aether to do so, but now the fireball explodes up in the entire group. instead.
Yep. Yep, exactly. And it lets you really tailor anything that you want to do for what is happening, whatever obstacle you're trying to overcome. But we also have one of the degrees is just called wild card. And that's
Mm,
because even during all of our mechanic building and playtesting and everything like that, even with rules that are super flexible and really easy to interpret in a bunch of different ways, we still had players coming up with things that just didn't fit into these
yeah.
parameters. So our wild card degree is there just to make that work. If they're just coming up with something that is so original and so unique that you're like,
Mm,
well, I don't even know how to build it with what's here. We're going to also use this wild card degree. So we built in catch-alls to kind of support the creativity that's going to come from players, because that's, for me, that's the most fun is watching players get into this world and just come up with the strangest things.
yeah.
One of the things that was actually the impetus in my head to really start writing down mechanics was during lockdown when I was playing this sort of weird version of the Crown how it used to be, and one of my players was playing the god of municipal laws. So just the most boring and drab divinity he could have possibly come up with. He's a philosophy professor, so nobody was surprised that he picked the god of municipal laws just because he wanted to argue a lot. But at one point, the players were in a car outside the city, and they were on a road that had been abandoned for like 200 years. It was busted, and it was so dilapidated that it was really beating up their already very junky car. And so like I got to hear his thought process, and he was sitting there trying to figure out what to do, and he was like, I'm not the god of travel, I'm not the god of cars, I'm not the god of roads or anything like that. But what he ended up doing was is he brought the stretch of road beneath their car up to code as they drove across
Mm,
it. So
yeah.
that was his route that he did. And so it ended up being like the concrete equivalent of like a magic carpet ride. They drove on
Yeah,
this
right.
perfectly smooth bit of concrete,
I can
and then
imagine
it
like the
crumbled to
yeah,
dust behind them.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was wonderful to see that kind of creativity in action, and just to like watch his gears turning as he was figuring out what he could do with municipal laws to allow them to like drive smoothly through the woods. So
Mm.
it was just, that's the thing that I love the most about getting to run this game, is just watching players do that. It's so much fun.
And I think one of the things that I think is the most genius sort of design around the ropes and such is that find there's about I've played a lot of different TTRPGs now. Not as many as Sarah, obviously, but I've played a lot of different TTRPGs, seen a lot of different systems, and I think that people often design a new TTRPG around being rules light and about like trying to free your creativity, and they make the mistake of meaning that in order to create of assuming that in order to free your creativity you need to have no rules, or as few
Mm,
rules as possible. And so they'll say like, oh, the rules don't get in the way. If you want to do something, you spend a point of power, and then you do the thing. And it's really just down to you and the DM to describe like what the purview of what the range of that power is. And I think then you start to unfairly punish the players that aren't as creative thinking as others, and not sort of remembering that creativity is a skill that not everybody possesses. Not everybody has
mm,
honed the idea to think outside the box in this way. And so I think having a set of rules around the rote so that you can ask your players very creatively what is it you want to do, and they can describe it to the limit that they want to describe it. But it's also not discouraging people who don't think that way from they can instead look at the mechanics that you've given them and say like and be prompted, like creative prompts essentially. How long a duration does this spell need to last? How many people is it affecting? What is it you're trying to do? Like, is it to do with damage? Is it to do with discovering new information? Is it to do with this and this and this? And by designing your rote in such a way, I think you've found like a really nice balance of uh of not stifling creativity, but also putting some like concrete rules to it and concrete costs to it that keep things fair. among a party that would otherwise be. I've got this really creative guy who loves to take the spotlight and find like the brokenest ways to break a game. And then I've got this other person who doesn't know any of that stuff. I think it's very clever.
Yeah,
Did it
thank you.
did did it go through a lot of playtesting to get to that stage? Like, how did the rope system come about?
Yeah, it definitely did. It definitely did. There was just it was a lot of so I think the thing that was most useful for me is I was actually playtesting two separate games at the same time that knew nothing about each other, kept them very separate, and they were very separate players. I had like my D&D group that was going that was very like kind of rigid and hard lined and everything like that. And then I had a group of my friends who are actors and improvisers and people who did not like rules and did not
Yeah,
like
right, right,
rigidity
right,
or
right.
anything like that. And I had both of them playing the same story at the same time and just like trying to see how they would interact with the rules that I presented, the
Yeah,
mechanics that I suggested, and it really came down to kind of blending the two of those things because the group that is very familiar with D&D, they enjoy some of the rigidity that comes from having a bunch of spells laid out already. One of my
yeah,
players
right,
even wrote down her spells. She came up with them and they were
right.
just what they were,
Yeah,
and it felt like she had a spell book and she just went to back to these ones over and over, which is a totally valid way
yeah,
to play this. But then the group of actors that I had, they just wanted to do weird stuff.
yeah.
You know, they were just like, but I want like one of my players, he was playing the god of cats. He referred to himself as the minister of cats. And one thing that he wanted to do is he wanted to be able to pick up a cat and use it as a telephone and have what he said come out the mouth of another cat. He just sprung that on me. I had no idea where it's coming from, and I just had to kind of stop and be like, all right, clearly these rules don't support that level of creativity, but what if they did? And so we
Mm,
sort of like broke down the rules portion that was being so
mm.
successful over here and allowed players to improvise with our rules in the group over here and kind of like found the spot in the middle.
It's yeah. I mean, it's I love it. I've as like a wannabe game designer myself, I guess. Like I've listened to podcasts about like game design, about what makes for good game design and what doesn't, and it's led me to thinking about the D&D rules in a sort of a very meta way, about like what makes for good, fun gameplay, and it's led me to making decisions for my own games, like trying to remove the stunned condition as much as possible and the unconscious condition and things that basically are the D&D equivalent of skip a turn, because skip a turn is generally bad game design. Like you don't want a portion of the
Yeah,
game to be you don't get to play the game right now.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, we all know from like a player perspective, when you're playing D&D and you've got an enemy that stuns you or paralyzes you or hold person and stuff, and then it gets to your turn and you're like, well, you can't do anything, next person's turn, especially in a
Yeah.
combat when it's taken like 20 minutes to get back to your turn in the first place. So things like that I think about a lot, like the game design of D&D and like how to try and make those things more interesting. Like when a player does go down to 0 hit points in my games, and is unconscious, instead of it just being like, okay, your turn, roll a death saving throw, and then move on, I try to include them in it by saying like, your life is flashing before your eyes as you lay there dying. Like, what is a memory you remember, and how might that affect your the rest of your party right now, or like what's a memory you have together of this person who's dying.
Mhm.
Anything like that, just like small amounts to try and keep them involved in the gameplay. So yeah, I do think about game design a lot, um and when I started playing the Crown, I was very impressed with not only like the layout and stuff, but the actual like mechanics of the game. So where did it most recently evolve? So we kind of talked about the beginnings of it, and how many iterations has it been through, and what is still evolving about the Crown today? Where is it at the moment?
Um yeah, so Gen Con 2022 yeah, 2022 we had just a little quick start guide that um was sort of the gist of the game. It was definitely the game that I had been running, but I am a very like I'm a very loose storyteller. You know, I tend to play for a lot of narrative flair with kind of vague guidelines guiding whatever the rules are going to be and everything like that. So putting anything to paper that could other than like my scattered notes, of course, but putting down something that players could hold and use and everything. That first iteration came around for Gen Con last year. Um, and then and that was leading up to our Kickstarter that we did and everything like that. And then this past year, the game has gone from that, and I have finally put all of my notes and compiled everything together into the version that I played at this Gen Con.
Yeah.
That book that you got to see that was like partially laid out had some of our wonderful art in it, but all the mechanics and everything like that were set and kind of have been set for a good chunk of time at this point. But I am always going back to the beginning of the book and just like starting at the front cover and kind of looking through it and seeing the things that I think don't work or could be changed or whatever. And eventually I will stop that and we will send this book to print. Um,
The
but for the
the funny
time
note on
being,
that the funny note on that was that I turned up to play at Gen Con, and I remember saying something like, so is this like a play test? Are we like helping you to see it? And I think Sarah said like, oh no, it's not play test. This is done. Like we're finished, kind of thing. This is like the one that is going to be published. And then when we after the character creation, when we then a couple of days later got back up to actually play the game, you were sitting next to me, and something came up, and you were like, "Yeah, we should word that better." And you like flicked open your book and started making notes in it and stuff. I was like, "Yeah, it's
yeah,
done. It's done in the sense of any artwork being done. They say that no art is ever completed; it's abandoned."
yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
sure
And
Leonardo da
I
Vinci was still looking at the Mona Lisa, being like, I could just touch. Maybe I could
just a little bit
just
more,
a
just a
little bit
little
more
bit more.
here.
Yeah, I even spent today, like we go to print very soon. But I even spent today rewriting things. Like I'm doing my final. It is actually final. Sarah, I'm so sorry. It is actually final. Probably. My like layout edit pass and my copy edit pass and all of those things. And in this final one, I'm putting more stuff into the book. I'm adding about another 5,000 words. Whoops. Um, but it's
just
all very
just another
just
final
just
five
a
thousand
little
words.
just a little final 5,000 words. It's all very necessary stuff, though. You know, it's a lot of like long form examples just so people can kind of see how to play the game. And a lot has gone into the storyteller chapter because it's so integral for this game is, you know, having um, a really like experimental kind of storyteller behind it who's
Hmm.
just willing to let players play and let
Yeah.
them have a good time and really like embody the characters that they're doing. And so like writing the advice chapter for that is where I've been putting a lot of my energy. Um, and but I think it is almost done at this point. Very close. Very close.
Eventually, deadlines force you to be done with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't before we sort of talk about the future of the crown. We didn't end up telling people like why is it called the crowned, and like what is the setting of
Oh
the
yeah.
the 10 deities, the 10 crown, the 10 uber deities, because
Yeah.
everybody's playing a god, but you are also sort of
Hmm.
like what I would call a lesser god, and there are greater gods above you, and they are the
Yeah.
crowned.
So
What are they?
yeah, so
Also, Pixies and
the
Pins is in
setting
chat and says I don't believe you when you're talking about being done almost.
well, we have to turn it in at some point.
So it's almost
I
done.
love you. Um, so the setting is does not take place on Earth. It takes place, you know, somewhere else. It's a homebrewed world. It,
Yeah.
you know, doesn't matter. But the main location is called the Shining Garden, which is this densely packed urban expanse that is on a disc above the ocean. It's like 2 miles above the ocean on a little elevator shaft way out to sea because God, so why not? And there's hundreds of millions of people in the city, and there are millions of gods, and you are playing one of them, but you are bonded to a member of who are effectively the ruling pantheon of this city. There are 10 gods that you are could be bonded to, and this sort of takes the place of like your character class.
Mm, mm,
You know, there's like, for example, there's Nell, who is the god of death and butterflies and business and taxes and things like that. And so you could be bonded to him. Or there's
Things
Spark,
like
who is
that.
life and
You know,
animals, and
things like that.
you know
Things like death and butterflies in Texas. These are all
and
you know,
taxes.
you can
Yeah,
see what's
yeah.
holding those together.
Um, but those 10 gods are so incredibly powerful that their divinity has grown out of their heads into crowns. And those crowns are made of whatever it is they are the god of.
Mm.
So Nell's crown is he's got 10 butterflies made of bone that encircle his head, and they flap and sometimes leave and come back and stuff. Um, and so each of these
Yeah,
crowned
there's a crap.
gods are the ones that you were bonded to.
God of there's a god of like beasts and nature and things that has like an antler crown. And the god
Yep.
of like urban development and stuff has like a city that's on the head, like a little building
Yeah.
skyscraper crown. It's some
Yeah.
incredible design.
It,
Like the artwork. I might for the YouTube might put some of the artwork up around just so that people can see it.
totally.
It's incredible stuff. Really beautiful artwork. And who did you say is doing the art for it?
Tanel Lovett. She's an artist out here in Seattle. She does a lot of the work for the World of Chaldea that Peter Atkinson is
Right, yeah.
doing, that I mentioned before. And we are incredibly lucky to have her on it. She's super super talented, and I really wanted just one artist to do cover to cover, just for
Give you
that
give you a
visual
feel of consistency,
cohesion.
yeah. Yeah.
It's so it I mean, like I get very sad every time I open up like a new like tentpole kind of game book, and there's, I mean, I'm happy that a bunch of artists are working, but also trying to find any kind of visual cohesion when there's 40 or 50 artists working on a book. um I personally just enjoy getting to dive into a visual of a game. And because a lot of my background is in a visual medium, like having consistent art like that throughout the book was super important. And Tanel is crushing it. Like everything just
Absolutely.
looks so
Yeah, it's
so
it's
good.
it's an
So good.
incredibly beautiful book to pick up. And I know a lot of people who get new systems, new settings and stuff with no intention of ever actually playing them, just because they're walking through a game shop and they pick up the book and they're like, "Oh my God, I must have it." So I think that
Yeah.
that's going to be a big selling point as well. So the actual concept of these 10 ultimate divinities being like so powerful that their particular purview grows out of their head. Where did that spark come from? The idea for the crowns in the first place?
That was from the novel originally.
Right.
The setting for the novel is actually pretty much exactly the setting in the role playing game.
Oh well.
There's a couple little minor tweaks
Yeah.
to some of the crowned gods and how they behave and everything. Um, but it not a lot has changed setting wise, honestly, since
Mm.
then. So it I was just kicking around the idea, because we started with the angel and everything from there, and then I was looking at regalia in general, and I was thinking, well, should they have a throne that is made out of what their
Yeah.
purview
Right.
is, or like some kind of a staff or scepter or something like that? And I finally
Halo,
landed
a
on
crown.
on crowns. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep.
Beautiful stuff. Yeah, and so that became the name for the system. Did you at any point have different names that you were toying around with? Did you have like a placeholder name that was starting
No.
to take? No,
No, that was
just
also the
straight to the
the
crown.
the placeholder name for the book was the Crowned as well.
All right.
So it's just been that forever. And I guess honestly, the Crowned was kind of a placeholder for that one. I didn't
Yeah.
really like it at the time, and I was like, well, just I want to name my file something. So
Yeah.
that's where I came up. I was like, well, give it this. Um, and then it really grew on me. No pun intended, but
Yeah.
the longer that it was there, the more I became into it. And then once I decided I liked it, then I just built more around that as a concept and really leaned into the name. I tend to name a lot of things first and then figure out what that means later.
Right. That's cool.
Work backwards that way.
So tell me about like the character creation of this, because you must like to have such a wide range of possibilities for your characters. You've mentioned that you've kind of got like character class, so you can you can choose one of those 10 deities to be sort of I don't want to say tied to, but like uh,
It is bonded. The term in
bond
there is
bonded
bonded.
bonded
Yeah.
is the word, yeah.
Yeah.
So you bond to one of those deities, and is that something that you decided like that was a must, that no that because you kind of wanted flexibility in a lot of the rules? Was that one of the things where you're like, we're going to be inflexible on, like, you can't be bonded to multiple, you can't be bonded to none, you have to
Mm.
pick one and be bonded to it?
Yeah, it is definitely a case where, so once I started thinking of them as kind of character classes, it became easier to fit the rest of the game around that.
Yeah.
Because the novel originally was all about like it was about a character first becoming a god and what that process was like and who he was bonded to, and in the book he was fought over quite a lot based on what his
Right.
purview was. So like different members of the ruling pantheon, they're called the Clade as a
Played.
group.
Yeah.
So so different members of the Clade were kind of fighting over who would get him, and so from that kind of came um, this concept of the players getting to be bonded to one of the crowned gods. And it's not a permanent thing. You can't multi-class in the way that you would be
Mm.
bonded to two of them at the same time, at least not mechanically. If you wanted to do that in a game, that sounds dope, and I
Right.
highly encourage you to do it. Um, uh, but you are bonded to one of them when you build your character, and in theory, that lines up sort of with whatever your personal purview is. If you
Yeah.
decide you want to be the god of fire, you might be bonded to Tempest, who is the more elemental of the gods, and he's got
Yeah.
storms and things like that. But you don't have to.
Right.
Um, Narratively, one of those gods, his name is Fetch. He is the god of divinity and the god of crowns. Narratively speaking, he's the one that hands out divinity to everybody, and
Right.
technically the one who assigns whatever that bond is. So there's a lot of fun that you can come up with for your character's backstory if you're thinking like, am I bonded to a god that makes sense to me? Like, am I the god of fire, but I am bound to the god of technology?
Yeah. Right.
Why
Right.
does
Right.
that exist? You know, am I happy with what this is? And the other thing is we have is
Just the god of
like
electrical
these
fires
crowned
only.
gods. Yeah, yeah. These crowned gods live in the city with you, and they wander
Mm.
around and they do their own thing. So like the chance of you running into them is pretty high. Like it is encouraged for the storyteller to involve your character class in the plot. Like it's just fun. Do it. You know, and so these gods have their own machinations and shenanigans that they're doing behind the scenes. And so you as a player, if everyone decides at the table that this is an aspect of the game that you want to include, sometimes that bond can be swapped to another Clade member with or without your knowledge, and it alters your character sheet because you get bonuses, you know,
Yeah.
depending on who you're bonded to and stuff, and access to certain abilities. So you would then lose those abilities and immediately gain the new ones of whoever you were now bonded to. And so like that can be a very fun thing to play with in the game. It's just kind of swapping what your character class is in the middle
Mm.
of everything. You know, and it doesn't affect how you play the game that much. This is mostly like a narrative thing that would be fun.
Mm.
You know, you
Mm.
do get access to different things and your stats will shift around a little bit, but it's not, when I'm saying switch your character class, you're not switching from like fighter to wizard. It's not that drastic. It's really just swapping kind of the flavor
Yeah.
of the world around you.
Yeah. Like if you were a god of fire, like it would look different. Like if your fire was from the elemental god guy, or whether it was from technology, or whether you suddenly are now like more to do with the nature and the beasts and stuff, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
your fire becomes a more fireflies at that point. So you'd flavor the things differently, and I think there'd be a lot of good story in there as to like which one you're
Yeah.
connected to. The other thing that kind of strikes me about, like, when you're going for an inflexible sorry, a flexible system of character creation, I have played with a lot of metagamers and a lot of power gamers and a lot of min maxers in my time, and I find that sometimes when you're putting those guys in a party with somebody who is much more about just like having a lot of flaws and really playing into those flaws and playing characters that are not that great at doing what they're doing, but that's kind of the role play of what they want. It can be very difficult to balance. enjoyment at the game table. Like, not you don't always have to balance power level if you've got a powerful character in one of your parties, and everybody else is cool with that guy kind of being like the Superman of the Justice League kind of thing, then that can
Mm.
work out fine. But if you've got some discontent around your players because of the differences in abilities of those characters, that can lead to some problems. So when you have a system of character creation where it's just pick a thing that you're a god of, how do you find a way to balance if somebody in the party goes, I'm the god of open-faced bacon and cheese sandwiches, and that's it. Like, not even closed sandwiches. On the open-faced sandwiches is what I'm the god of. And then another person in the party is like, I'm the god of power, and just like pick something as broad as they possibly can, so that they can, in
Yeah.
any situation, come up with some explanation as to why they could be useful there. How do you balance that
So
or
that goes
nerf them?
back to the Aether pool, and how that works. Everybody at the table has the same amount.
Yeah,
So the potential that every god has at the table is the same. So if the god of open face sandwiches is like, you know what, I'm going to throw this open face sandwich at this guy, and it is going to do like rank 10 in damage, and it's going to knock him out, do a bunch of damage, just right like that. That's going to cost the same as if the god of power is just like shooting them with a power beam at
yeah,
rank 10. It's going to
right,
cost them the same amount. It's going to do the same amount of damage. It's just going to be themed differently because we're really about telling a story. Like that's what we're going for more than anything else. You know, it's not
yeah,
about the combat or about the rules or anything like that. We are here to have a good time with some friends at a table, you know.
yeah,
And so the game kind of self balances. Like I've had people pick some really like pick some purviews that have very broad applicability. Like I had a player just a couple of weeks ago pick simple machines as his purview. So like
right.
wedges and screws and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
levers, you know, like
There's simple
those
ones. Yeah,
six things, which are everywhere and
yeah,
crazy powerful and do
yeah,
all
yeah,
sorts
yeah,
of bonkers stuff. But he still has the same amount of points to pull from
yeah,
than anyone else at the table, you know? And so if you're trying to do like even if you're playing like the god of black holes and you're like, well, I'm going to open a black hole, you still can only spend so
you
much
can
aid
only do it
on it.
as of yeah.
So you open it, but it's not like a black hole,
It's
you
not
know?
gonna.
Like a
It's
black
not
hole
gonna
will open.
suddenly. Yeah, it's not gonna suddenly suck the entire
Yeah, it's not
planet
going to
into it.
swallow
It's
everything up.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So because of
Sarah
how the
wishes
rote
Sarah
system is
wishes
set
for
up,
me to point out to you that it's called God juice, and you're saying it wrong.
I know. She wants me to call it God juice so bad, and I will never do that. It's too weird for me.
It's too weird
Yeah,
against the
everyone's
rest
got
of
the
the
same
feed.
against everything else. Yeah, everyone's got the same
God
six
juice.
pack of God juice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the process of coming up with the character for it. Like we all sat down together for character creation. It really is a game that encourages or rewards you making your characters together as well. Like you're gonna be working with these people for this story. Like make your characters together so that you can feed off each other and you don't want to like step on toes. I kind of encourage that anyway whenever I'm doing a new game of any TTRPG. Like you're going to have more fun as a party if you've created your characters as a party, because then you're not stepping on each other's
Yeah.
toes, being like, "Oh, I thought I was going to be the sneaky edge lord." Uh, and so for the game that we played, we had the god of compulsion and the god of like hesitation, essentially. I can't remember the exact words we used
Mhm.
for them, but like one of them was like, and they were brother and sister, and they were like, I'm the god of do it now, impulsivity, kind of like you should do this thing, and the brother was the god of like maybe think about it first, kind of, and so had this hesitation stuff. And in the
Yeah.
same game, we had AJ was the god of post-it notes,
Yep.
which was made a, like a secretarial kind of character. And I was the god of questions, and I decided I was like a
Mhm.
kindergarten teacher, and I could only speak in questions, and I had all sorts of powers related to like what happened here, and like asking questions about information. And yeah, that was a lot of fun to just come up with like something that's going to be broad enough of a category that you can find ways to use it in different
Mhm.
ways, If you're only the god of something specifically combat, like if you're the god of swords, you might have a harder time being like, okay, we're not in a combat situation, we're in like a mystery solving situation. How am I going to use swords to try and like solve this mystery? Um, whereas on the other end of the scale, if you're too broad, if you are just the god of things, like well, things. How am I going to use things in this? Do you have in the game like recommendations or suggestions for people who might not have been aware of those sorts of the people who don't play TTRPGs enough to play them on a level like I do, where I can kind of see those things coming as I'm creating the character and go, I want to be in this range. Do you suggest to people,
Yeah,
hey, don't be too broad, don't be too niche?
yeah. It's the our main suggestion is always pick the thing that is calling to you. You know, whatever you really feel like you want to play and you feel like you could be creative and inventive with it, that's going to be the correct answer. We
Yeah,
do have in the book, we have a bunch of random purview charts that you can roll on. If you want, if or even just like read and pull some inspiration from, or
yeah,
just pick off the chart, you know. And as I was writing, I tried very hard to use new examples every time I had to do an example in the book.
yeah,
So
yeah,
throughout
yeah,
it, there's even more suggestions and everything, because you can definitely get like choice paralysis when I
yeah.
sit down and I say you can be anything. What
You
do
can
you
be a
want to
god of
do?
anything.
Just pick one thing. You know,
There's the problem
I
of yeah finding a
definitely
blank canvas and being like paint something. I mean like what?
like I don't know what. Yeah. So there's definitely like suggestions in there for the storyteller how to guide towards what a person is interested in, you know, and it might be easy to choose something large or kind of thematic? Like, do you think you might be interested in something that is tangible versus intangible? Do you like elemental or modern? Or, you know,
Mm,
how do you like what are you drawn to? And then you can kind of start to narrow things down. And somewhere along the way, inspiration is going to strike, and that is the thing that you're going to be the god of.
yeah, I mean it works, doesn't it? And how many
Yeah,
times have you played the game now? How many different gods have you seen through your playtests and stuff? Are we talking hundreds?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a lot. It's been a lot. Um, yeah, we've had close to 100 playtesters at this point, like
Wow.
different human beings.
Yeah.
And then we've had a fair number of repeats among them, and they've often played different gods coming back
Different gods. Yeah.
for different reasons. And then I have gone out of my way to play the game at as many different levels as possible, power levels.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and long form campaign. I definitely wrote the book for more long form campaign.
Yeah.
It's fine for a one shot. I don't want to downsell anything about the game. It's fine
Hmm.
for a one shot. It's pretty great for like a two or three shot.
Yeah.
If players can take the first session to choose the god they want to be and make
Yeah.
characters. It's just making characters is such a fun process in this game.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of things to build for your character. You know, all of your wonders are chosen like a la carte. Everything about what your god is, you can you can tailor. You know, like when you pick your weapons, you buy weapon that does some
Yeah.
amount
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
damage, and then you as the player get to decide what it is. You know, so if you're playing
Yeah.
the god of
I had
open
a
faced sandwiches,
as the go to questions, I had a sickle
yeah,
that was like kind of shaped like a question mark.
yeah, or you have like, like an open face panini press or something like that. Like
Yeah.
like whatever you want your weapon to be, you can have it and it fits for your
And
character
it'll
and you
just
can
do
have
the
your
same
the
amount of damage as the guy with the great sword because
Yep,
that's just
absolutely.
how it's balanced.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's and we've got hundreds of wonders in the book to choose uh those little specializations and those little quirks for
Mm,
your character. And each one of them you can customize in any way that you want. So really, I have not had the same player twice. You
mm,
know, like
mm.
it's every character has been so unique. Nobody's even been kind of close to each other. Everybody sits down with a different purview
Yeah.
every time. They always come up with ideas that I haven't heard before. Um, I only recently had, for the first time, somebody double up with a purview that has already happened. And there's the God of Sandwiches in a game that I'm running right now, and the game that had the God of Simple Machines in it. That playtest group, somebody wanted to play sandwiches in kind of a joking way. They were like, "Well, I'll just play sandwiches," and I was like, "Actually, that Sandwich God's doing really good in our other game."
It's actually a thing,
Um,
and it's actually a really powerful thing.
he's actually super powerful because he has interpreted sandwiches as things like if there is two
To
identical
be
objects
sandwiched
or a
between two
thing,
things, yeah.
if there's a thing between it, that
It's
is
a
a
sandwich.
sandwich. And so
Yeah.
that is the thing that he can affect. And I was like, that's a perfectly great way to do it. Because it's about, like you've said a couple of times, it's about how you can use your purview to
Yeah.
affect the world around you and deal with obstacles and problems and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it, and I definitely see what you're saying about like it being ideal for like a 2, 3 shot as well, like as long form
Mm-hmm.
campaigns, because like at the end of the character creation session, which was, it's a long it's not like a one shot TTRPG roll a d6 and that's your character. Like you're coming
Yeah.
up with all of your wonders, you're coming up with everything that's affecting your ether pool. You're coming up with as well who you were before you ascended to being a god. Um, and how long have you
Yeah.
been a god, and that stuff can affect you as well, like what was your name and what is your name now, is it the same thing or have you chosen a different god name and stuff. And like me coming up with being a kindergarten teacher, so I was constantly being asked all day every day, like why, but why though, but why. And so that kind of influenced me becoming a god of questions. And but that, by doing that, gave me a whole slew of NPCs. It's like, oh, we've got this kindergarten. Where was my kindergarten? Where do I live now? Do I still live
Mm-hmm.
above the kindergarten? And the setting as well. Like just through the character creation, you're also going through the setting. And there's just so much history in it, and so much lore, and you've fleshed out the setting so well that I'm like, I just wanted to play more of it than we got a chance to with the one shot, especially because I
Yeah.
had to run away halfway through the one shot to go to a panel.
Yeah.
Um, and so it
That's
really
your
does
problem.
lend
Too many
itself to
panels, man. Too many
too
panels.
too many panels, man. I'm just never just sitting and enjoying myself at cons anymore. Yeah, so I think that's going to be one of the huge selling points of it, is that it can work really well as a 2 or 3 shot, because sometimes that's all people have time for,
Hmm.
especially with a new
Hmm.
system. But that it can still work really, like it can also tell some incredible stories through long form as well if people want to sit down and play it. I know that I, for one, I'm really interested in running like a 2 or 3 game of it on my channel, when it's released and published and stuff, because I love the system
Yeah.
so much and I love the character creation so much, that I'd love to get people on to actually play it, for like 2 or 3 games for sure.
Yeah. That'd be great.
So where are we at in the present day of it? Like you say, you're going to print soon, and then what's the timeline of like when can people actually find it in their game stores or online or whatever? When can
So
when can people
we
actually
we
grab it,
should
start
be,
playing it?
yeah. So before December, we will go to print. Our deadline is technically the beginning of November. We're gonna go over that a little bit, just fine tuning and polishing. But we're still
You just got
really,
another
really
10,000 words to write.
just another little
Just
ten
to
thousand words, just a little bit, just a little bit. Just some polish work, That's all it is.
just to polish, yeah.
Um, but we're going to be printing through Drive Through RPG, and once the process for that is we submit it, and then they send us a proof, and then we have to check the proof and make sure that's good, and then if that's good, then we can start fulfillment for our Kickstarter stuff. When I talked to them over a year ago, they couldn't really give me any uh like solid parameters for when printing would happen because they were having
Mm,
problems with supply lines, and COVID was still
right,
messing everything up. Not like it stopped, but
right.
things are at least easier, like adjusting around it, for
there's,
manufacture and
there's
things.
not a ship stuck
Um,
sideways in the Panama Canal or whatever it was, Suez Canal.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So we on the Kickstarter said April of 2024 for print delivery. Um, I feel very confident that we're going to make that. Um, I think I think once it goes to print officially, the digital version is done, and we can fulfill that if people are interested, and we can send that out to people. Like the PDF will be done and
Yeah,
ready as soon as we're ready to go to print. So in theory, not too much longer for
nice.
the digital versions. We've still got our backer kit store is still open for a little bit. which you can get to through our website. And I mean, once that closes, it's only a few more weeks until layouts are done. The final few pieces of art that are coming in are done, and it's all put together and just ready to send out.
Nice. And then what for the future of it at that point? Once it's out and done, you've already got plans for like a second edition of it or any of that?
I have plans for so many things. um, when I had sent this off to the editor for the first time, I started the second book because I was on a writing spree and I had to send this off. So I was like, well, what else can I write?
Mm,
But I have run so many games in this and expanded the world in so many games for this that we do have plans for game or for books that are outside the city. There are different source books that we're planning on for just kind of augmenting some of the wonders that are already there. Just little things we can put out for $5 or $10 on drive through
right, right.
to help fund the next large print book that we do, which will probably be also Kickstartered or through BackerKit or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, I paid for this one mostly out of pocket, so getting some money back would be cool.
Yeah.
And then we'll keep making stuff as long as people are buying it. So if
Yeah.
it's a thing that we can get people's eyes on and they're playing it, I've got a ton of ideas. I really love this world, and I will write it forever
Yeah.
because it's fun. It's really fun and it's super unique, and I have a lot
And
of ideas.
have
So,
you got ideas in or even fleshed out different areas of the world that's outside of that main disc that things are on, so you know where the other continents are and the other places in the world, and you
yeah,
might
I
set
do.
things there as well,
Um, I've
setting
got I've
modules
got
out
a
there.
lot of that stuff. The first couple of games that I played were like I was like, here's the city that I spent a whole bunch of time in, and the players were immediately like, I leave the city. I leave, and I was like, so you
In
panic,
an
you just
always
like
way.
create a bunch of stuff, because they just immediately left. So in the setting, there are 10 holy cities. The Shining Garden is the biggest, and there's this rail line that makes a big ritual circle to keep all of humanity safe, and that rail line
Okay.
goes through the 9 other cities. So there are 9 other cities, but there is also what is outside that rail line, what is inside the rail line, things like that. There's a lot of propaganda in the city that says there's nothing out there
Yeah,
to
yeah,
keep all of the people inside where it's safe. Tons of stuff out there. There's multiple moons. They all have stuff and backstories.
yeah. Oh
There's a
wow.
lot of very weird things in this world. I had
Holy
players
cow.
pursue strange aspects along the way, and I just really leaned into that hard, and it became a very strange place, and I love it.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
It
So
was
so
it was
would
great
you
getting to like world build with the players as they were like, oh, but what's over here, and then I would figure out what that was, and just like crafting it all with their strange ideas was stupendous.
so the Crown, as far as I understand it, is the sort of player's handbook, as it were. It's the rules on character creation, the rules for how to play the game. It's a little on the setting of like of where it's set, this particular holy city.
Mm.
But there isn't in this one, as far as I understand, a campaign module, right? There's not like a story that you're telling people that they should be playing through within the city.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah,
really
correct.
just
There's not a
for you to
module.
create your own
Part of
story within this
mhm.
setting.
Well, part of our Kickstarter, we unlocked with stretch goals 2 modules that we basically they're one shots that we're expanding to be kind of proper modules, like a
Right.
2 or 3 shot thing. That Sarah Moore is writing, and we those were unlocked, and those will go out digitally with everything else as part of that Kickstarter fulfillment. But then you'll also be able to get them in other places. And one of the thoughts that we had, there are 10 districts in the city. 10 is a very auspicious number. There are 10 members of
I'm
the Clade. There are 10
I'm
districts, 10
realizing,
cities.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. And then, of course, 10 times the work for me, which was maybe dumb. I could have picked
What?
4, but I
Yeah,
picked 10.
was
I don't
there a
know
reason
why.
you picked 10 other than just the decimal nature of human
It
cultures?
was not a problem when it was in the novel and having 10 things everywhere. That was a piece of cake. But then transferring that into game mechanics, I had a chance to change it and I just didn't. Maybe I should have, but here we
Now
are.
you got 10
Um,
things to write in every place.
yeah. So one of the things that we're planning is like the Shining Garden tourism guide, which will have a brief little module for each one of the districts, because the districts are all very different,
Yeah.
and they have their own little personalities and cultures and everything, because they're so huge. And so we'll have that tourism guide as one of our future projects coming out, and that'll have a bunch of those modules, and then potentially also kind of a longer form module as well. I've run enough of these games at this point that there's a lot to pull from to put into something like that. So it would kind of start the writing process with it already being kind of half tested, which is always fun.
Mm.
Um, yeah, there's definitely more to guide out there. The problem arises from the modules aren't going to necessarily play the same depending on what your composition of gods at your table is.
Yeah.
Like if you've got all gods, like the one game that I'm running that Sarah's in, she's playing the god of joy. We also have the
Mm.
god of cinnamon, the god of sandwiches, and then the god of nostalgia and the god of packaging.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and so like those five gods are capable of playing the game the exact same way as any other table that I've
Yeah, yeah,
had.
yeah.
All of their choices are going to be so different because their purviews are so different and their characters are so different. So it becomes like writing a very rigid module that's like here's step one and step two and all these things.
Hmm.
That's really kind of tricky to do, but we do try really hard to set all of our storytellers up with as much help and guidance as possible, as much
Mm.
suggestion that we can possibly hand out to them.
Yeah. Incredible. Before I forget, I tend to ignore the chat. Well, don't ignore. I just don't spend a lot of focus on you guys and the chat while I'm in a short rest because I've got such a wonderful guest to chat with. But you can be asking us questions as we go. I'll set a little time at the side, set a little time aside at the end to answer any questions you guys have for either me or Damon. To make sure that I don't miss them in the chat, though, just redeem them with the channel points. You'll see underneath where the box says send a message, you'll see some copper pieces. You can click on that and you'll see a bunch of channel points. One of them is called Ask a D&D Question, I think. Only costs you 50 channel points, which you would have by now if you've been watching since the start. To ask any questions you like about this system or anything that I might not have mentioned yet, or something completely off the wall. So get those questions in and I'll ask them at the end. I wanted to, for a moment, now that we've kind of talked past, present, and future of Feral Games and The Crown, I kind of wanted to just pivot entirely and talk about other TTRPGs. Like, what is your background with TTRPGs in the first place? Like, you said you mentioned playing D&D before COVID and before sort of the inspiration for The Crown and everything.
Yeah.
How long have you been playing
My
TTRPGs?
A very long time. My mom ran me through my first game of D&D when I was 6.
Oh wow!
Um, so that would have been 1987 for that. Um,
So she was one
I
of the
I
she was one of the early adopters of D&D.
Yeah, absolutely. Everyone in my family is very big in games. We're all board gamers, RPG players,
Nice.
both tabletop, computer, console, all of the things. We're competitive. We like to beat each other, and that lends itself very well to a bunch of different things. So I've been playing D&D forever, as long as I can
Right,
remember.
yeah.
Like literally, as long as I can remember, I've been playing D&D.
Wow.
Um, but I've also just really been very hungry for games my whole life. So
Mm.
that really expanded for me in junior high. I started picking up like Magic the Gathering,
Hmm.
and a bunch of other RPGs that I could. I was playing Shadowrun, and then a lot in the '90s. I was
Right.
playing
Yeah.
World of Darkness stuff with Vampire and Werewolf and
Yeah.
Mage the Ascension. Um, and the storyteller that I had for all of the World of Darkness stuff, like her, I was talking with her not too long ago, actually. Like she really shaped a lot of how I think of, or a lot of the things that I think of when I am running a game and when I'm trying to be a storyteller, because she just had this like freedom that she offered to her players. Like
Yeah.
let's just like I'm here to just make sure that we're all having a good time. And it was refreshing from a lot of the people that I had been playing with at that age, who are all about like we're just gonna dungeon crawl and
Right,
kill
right,
stuff
right.
and loot the body and everything,
Yeah.
which is also a fun way to play the game. I just get more personal entertainment out of playing a more narrative like
Narrative driven. Yeah.
consequential game. Like I
Yeah.
really like my like the things that I do in games to matter.
Yeah.
You know, for good or ill, I like them to matter and have impact on the story and the other players and stuff like that. So, but I've played a bunch of things. You know, like as you were saying, Sarah has played everything. I've played so many games with her and on her show on Gen Con TV
Gen Con. Yeah.
and just I love games. I soak them up whenever I can. I have, the same problem everybody does where I'm going to buy a game because I like the art and because I want to support the
Mm.
creators, but I also know that I'm probably never going to have the time to actually play it, but I think it's
Yeah.
wonderful. Like I'm always thinking like this player has made a great game. I want to get it and kickstarting things and stuff like that. I'm in a bunch of gaming groups. Still, I'm very lucky and fortunate to have a lot of different groups. My Tuesday group has been going for like 20 years at this point. And I've been in it for 20 years, and it actually
Oh
preceded
wow.
me by another 6 or 8 because it was my older
Jeez.
brother's group and everything. So it's just like like I've played so many games through that group, and just they're all in different groups, and it's yeah, play a lot of stuff. I like it. I like the industry very much. It's
So
fun.
you got into it from like very early age. How old were you when you first started DMing and like was like took on the role of storyteller, GM, DM?
Yeah, that was longer to come.
Mm.
I had like real bad stage fright, I guess you would call
All
it,
right.
like when it
Yeah.
came to having to run a game.
Having to run it. Yeah.
That was a big thing for me to overcome. I've always homebrewed everything. Like I
Yeah.
have homebrewed games that I have been the player in, not the DM. Just because like I love that world building. I love it, love it, love it. And I
Yes.
can
Yeah.
just like bang out a whole bunch of stuff real quickly for it. So, but it was late high school when I first tried running a game, and I don't think it went very well. I was very scared to do it, and I was very scared to like have any kind of flexibility or any kind of preparedness, and it was definitely a
Right.
learning process. I've been fortunate to have
Was
a
it
lot
was
of
it just
very
out
good
of
storytellers.
was it just out of necessity? Like you wanted to play and nobody else wanted to step up, and you're like, I guess I'll try.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it was one of those things. Yeah, it was one of
Yeah.
those
That's fair.
things. And just like everybody died right away, and I wasn't even like trying to kill anybody, and I didn't understand what had happened, and everybody got really mad, and it's a lot of anxiety that comes from something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, when you don't
But
understand like the balance of it or like the way that the swing of dice can suddenly screw with your perfectly balanced game
yeah,
design.
yeah, it was definitely a struggle. Then that was second edition AD&D. That's what that
Right.
was, I think. And after that, I dove into I actually moved away from D&D for a while because I was like, this is bad. I obviously don't know how to play it.
Right.
And so then I started playing like the old Star Wars RPG, the D6 one.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was great. And then once I had all those D6s, then it was a brief jump into Shadowrun and
Yeah,
Rifts,
right.
which is
I
a weird
just I
one.
just uh, I just played my first Shadowrun at Gen Con actually. 'Cause I did an audiobook for one of the Shadowrun novellas.
Yeah,
And I recorded an audiobook for that. Which isn't out yet, but will be soon. And so while I was there,
that's great.
the person who got in touch with me about the audiobook was like, "I'm running Shadowrun. Do you want to actually play it? See what the hell it is that you're doing?" Essentially, I was like, "I'd love to. I'd love to get more context for what the hell this world is." And yeah, one of the first things that you learn about Shadowrun is it's just fistfuls of d6s. It's just so
Yeah.
many d6s, which is
And
a
it's
lot of
even
fun. It's a lot of
toned
fun, very
down quite a
tactile.
bit. Yeah. Yeah, I do like rolling dice. People love rolling dice.
Yeah,
I mean, the crown is a D6 system, and you make a pool out of it because people like rolling dice.
yeah, makes sense. Yeah, have you found of these sort of TTRPGs that you've played, have you found that you gravitate towards particular systems like the D20 system, the D6 system, the D10 system, like
Hmm.
the things that you've picked up on from different systems that you really enjoy? like the advantage system of 5e and
Hmm.
anything like that. Uh,
I yeah, I try and give systems a fair shot every time I play them. For whatever reason, every time I have tried to play anything that has been powered by the apocalypse or adjacent, I have bounced off of that for some reason. I don't know
mm,
why. Like Blades in the Dark, all of those. I'm just like, don't know why. I've bounced
interesting.
up. It hasn't been the people I've been playing with or the people
Yeah.
running the game or anything like that. But for whatever reason, I bounce off of those. I'm trying very hard because those games are all really wonderful.
Mm,
Like the concepts and the settings for all of those, and there's so many hacks for them, which is just great.
yeah.
Um, so I find that for me, I tend to lean towards story over mechanics
Yeah.
almost every time. And and having choice is the thing that I like a lot. I need when I'm building a character, I want a bunch of options to choose from. So if I'm going into a thing that only has four choices, I'm not going to enjoy it as much as if it's kind of a more customizable situation, regardless of how the mechanics work. I'm there to customize the character, make a weird little thing. I
Yeah.
don't care about breaking the system. I'm not trying to min max anything. I
Yeah.
just like if I could play like a mud wizard in D&D, I would be so happy. One of the reasons why I loved third edition and 3.5 so much is there was so many prestige classes.
Right.
You had
Yeah.
so many options to choose from,
So
just
much customizability.
hundreds of them. Yes, so much, and then a lot of that customizability like ended up in Pathfinder, which
Yeah.
is pretty crunchy. Sometimes I really like that crunch, but there's a lot of choice there as well.
Mm,
But also like 13th Age is really good, and Shadow of the Demon Lord spun off of a lot of that kind of prestige class
right.
vibe. Those games are also really great. Like I need choice. Those are the ones that I go to. The more
Yeah, that makes
options, the
sense.
better.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you,
If
the
I
more
have
you
a
can look at.
crippling hard time, cripplingly long time like making a character, that's going to be my game. Yeah.
That's the ones you love. That's one of the things I did notice about Pathfinder, to the point where we've kind of made a thing of it. Uh, my friend Dag, Dead Aussie Gamer, he's sort of rebranded himself to Dead Aussie Gamer a few years ago, but he used to be Ask a Pathfinder, and he used to be all about Pathfinder, and
Mm.
he was branding himself as like the Pathfinder GM and the one who knows everything about Pathfinder. At Gen Con, he actually won an award for being the best Paizo GM. Um, and and anytime he turns up in my channel, I've got like a command for like exclamation mark Pathfinder, and it just responds, "Shut up, Dag." Like, we don't care about your Pathfinder, and he's always trying to convert everybody to Pathfinder over D&D. Um, but then one time for like a fundraiser, we decided like, okay, what we'll do is we'll have Dag walk me through the Pathfinder character creation process. And for every X amount donated, I have to add more and more complexity to the character because, and oh boy, did we end like it ended up being like a 5-part fundraiser, and I've created this level 20 character with 10 levels of not prestige, but like the ones that can come after level
They're
20, like
they're
the
archetypes.
yeah, like
Yeah.
the like super levels or whatever. And then we've also got prestige classes in there, and there's multi-classing, and there's characters, and there's all the different feats that you can take. And Pathfinder's like you take a feat every second level or
So
something to
many.
customize. And every time we get to one
Unless
of
you're a
those
rogue,
options,
then it's so many more. Yeah.
yeah, and then we get to one of those options every time, and it'd be like, right, well, here's the feat list, and it'd just be literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of feet, and they're all super specific niche things. Like when
Yeah.
you are tightrope walking along a rope that is covered in oil, you get to add a +2 to the circumstance bonus of
Yep.
blah 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 blah.
Yep.
And you can just be like, okay, that's what my character's good at, tightrope walking. And then I'm just gonna make a
I
tightrope
mean,
walker.
one thing I like honestly I really respect about Paizo is making a game system that is as ridiculously crunchy and and hard to follow and hard to read and like make a book that is 650 pages long and still just charge the same amount for it. So
Yeah.
like I actually really respect them for doing that because they
Yeah,
were
that's
like, no,
interesting. That's a
we
good
know
point.
it's 650 pages because there's a rule for everything you want to do,
Everything you want to do.
everything, but it's all here all in one spot and we're not going to charge you extra for it.
My the thing that really highlighted it for me was when we got into like because I also as part of some other fundraiser put as like the stretch goal that I would run a three shot in Pathfinder myself, and people like love to troll me in my community, so of course we met the goal immediately. And so I had to learn how to freaking play Pathfinder finally. Um, and so I sat down and read the Pathfinder rulebook, like the core rules, obviously. I'd still be reading today if it was all of the rules. I read the core rules from cover to cover, and Dag was like, "That's the worst way to do it," but you do you, I suppose. And I got to a section on like how to how to calculate the DC for jumping or something, and there was a table for the surface that you are jumping from. There were like three tables actually, because one of the tables was like the the uh the structure of the surface. So like, is it solid? Is it shale? Is it gravel? Or is it sand or sandy or whatever? And then
Yeah,
another one was like the angle of the pavement that you're jumping from, and it's like, are you at a flat? Are you jumping from a flat surface, or are you jumping from a 45-degree surface, or all these different? And it was a table for it, and each one gave you different modifiers and stuff. And then it was like the same again, but for the ground that you're jumping to,
hmm,
and whether or not there was handholds to grab onto when you landed on that thing, otherwise you'd slip and stuff. And I was just reading that, being like, you could like this is the sort of thing that I wouldn't have even come up with this to take the piss out of it. Like if I was trying to take the piss out of how crunchy it is and how there needs to be a rule for every different thing, this is even beyond what I would have come up with to take the piss out of them for it. It's like, no, we are every
yeah.
bit as crunchy as people say and more. There's different modifiers and numbers for everything.
It's
And
really
Dag
out of control. It's really nuts.
and Dag, as now an award-winning GM for the Paizo system, even he's like, yeah, but people don't use it. People don't. You don't spend time. You don't spend time actually looking those rules up. You know the rules are there if you've got them, but nobody knows what the rules are off the top of their head, and nobody's going to actually spend
Yeah,
time looking it up.
just
You
make a
do like in
reflex
D and
save.
D.
Call it a
Yeah,
day.
just make a
Yeah,
reflex save. If it's a high number, I'll say that it succeeded. If it's a low number, I'll say it didn't. And if it's somewhere in the middle, then maybe we'll look something up, or maybe we'll make a choice.
yeah,
It's incredible, yeah. But I just love the variety of it. Once you start getting into TTRPGs as a hobby, you start to
yeah,
realize that there is like you think of it as a niche. You think of like gamers are already kind of like a clique. If you're a gamer, and then within gaming, you've got your video gamers, you got your board gamers, you got your role players, and then within that you think, oh, that's pretty niche then. And then you sort of zoom further into TTRPGs, and you're like, okay. And then you've got your crunchy TTRPGs, and you've got your rules light TTRPGs, and you've got
yeah,
your one shot TTRPG, like your one pages. And then you can zoom in on any one of those things, and it just keeps going. It's like a fractal. You just keep zooming in on whatever you think is a niche industry, and you find more and more and more niche in it. And so
yeah.
it's one of the wonderful things about being alive in this day and age is like the internet is, for all its negatives, it is a great place for finding the one thing that you really enjoy. Like I thought for a longest time that I wanted to be an actor. Like growing up, that was the thing that I was pursuing. I wanted to be an actor, and it was when I found TTRPGs that I was like, oh, this is what I want to be doing.
Mm,
This is
hmm,
who I am, and acting was close to this, and that's why I thought acting was what I wanted, and that's why I wasn't super content or happy being an actor and pursuing acting, is because it wasn't
hmm,
quite what I wanted out of this. When I discovered TTRPGs, it was right after I sort of gave up on acting. Like I made a conscious choice to go back to university and study a real job, because I wasn't being able to make a living from acting. And then I found TTRPGs, and I was like, oh, that kind of scratches the itch that acting was doing, and not realizing, no, it's the other way around. Like acting was scratching the itch. This is actually the cure. This is the thing that I actually wanted to do in the first place, because the storytelling and the performative elements, the role playing, the coming up with different characters, being able to change a
hmm.
character at will, like just being like, I'm bored of this one, let's play something else. It's uh, it's a wonderful system. I love it. All right,
Yeah,
let's
it's really good.
let's excuse me. Let's see if we've got any questions coming from the chat. I think people have been relatively quiet today, but let me check the requests queue. Oops, a daisy. There we go. And now Robert's playing every other character in the VLDL D&D. Acting skills for the win. Yeah, yeah, lots of that. All right. It seems like I haven't had any questions come in from today's session, so people have been relatively quiet. I'd
That's all
guess.
right.
Sorry, I couldn't listen closely. All good, right? I also know that my usual audience is probably elsewhere today because of the time difference while I'm in Perth, Australia.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
missing out on some people's. So is there anything else you want to talk about since we've got a few more minutes? Is there anything you want to mention about Formerly Feral that we haven't talked about, or the future of Formerly Feral? Any other projects that are not Crowned related that you've got percolating in the mind for Formerly Feral
Hmm.
games?
Yeah, I mean, for the company, I think we are going to do the crown as long as we can. We'll get this first one out the door, and we'll see how and if it is received.
Will
Like
it be like?
like
Will it be? Do you imagine it being like the flagship, but you have other things in the Formerly Feral fleet, or is like Formerly Feral synonymous with the Crowned?
I think it would be the flagship.
Right.
In an ideal world, it would be nice to write content for other games and like not have to worry so much about how that's going to tie in with the mechanics because the mechanics are already like locked and solid, and I could just like create in other things,
Yeah.
in other worlds that are already there. Um, but it's because definitely all of my mechanical brain is occupied with
Yes.
with holding the crowd together.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I
Soon
but
as
I
it's
think
soon
I
as it's
think if we could,
published and out there, you're like, okay, now something else is controlling it. I don't need to keep it all in my brain.
yeah, yeah, I'm really looking forward to just like, not that I don't enjoy running the crown because I
Yeah.
love running this game, but it has been like a little taxing recently to be writing it and running games and just
Right.
like so focused on it. So I'm really looking forward to getting this checked off and going back to just like living in the world and getting to play there and everything.
Right. Yeah.
And the thing that I'm most looking forward to, honestly, is people playing it without me.
Yeah. Right.
I have been involved and physically present for every game of the Crown.
Yeah. Right.
Just the whole time. I've been there either running it, playing it, or I've watched a couple of sessions that Sarah has been the
Yeah.
storyteller for. But it has yet to go to just an entirely new table where I am uninvolved. And I am really looking forward to that happening and hearing what that experience was like for everybody. Because I know the games, one of the problems that I had writing was like, I know the mechanics work in my head, but I know the mechanics, how they work in my head. And whether or not I have translated that correctly to
Yes. Yeah.
paper,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
that's
Especially after
very
this
hard.
much
Because
time
when I
working on
read
it.
it,
Yeah. Must be
yeah,
hard to
yeah, and
look
I
at it
read
with fresh
something back and
eyes.
I'm
Yeah.
like, obviously
Makes
that
sense to
works,
me.
makes
And it's
sense.
not until
Ship
somebody
it.
else entirely
Um,
starts, yeah, until somebody else takes it over
yeah,
and struggles to understand or read what you've said, and you're like,
yeah. I mean,
but
it's
it's so much
definitely
obvious.
it's definitely a big lift for the storyteller. I feel like this is a very easy game for the players to play and get into and engage with. Even the rote system, which maybe feels a little chunky,
Yeah,
I feel like once you've done a rote or two, it's much smoother. But
yeah,
this game is a heavier lift for the storyteller. You need to be pretty dedicated to what you're going to be doing because you need to be so flexible. Um, the bestiary that we have in there doesn't have a stat block like in any monster manual or anything like
mm,
that. Like
mm,
it's
mm.
got, we have these things called tenants for for the monsters, and it's truths about whatever the creature is. So the
Right,
example that we always use is like you could have a tenant that says goblins can fly. That's just a truth about them. But
yeah,
what does that mean in the game? Does that mean that they have wings? Do they have jetpacks? Are they coming in on like flying citadels covered in
yeah,
cannons and everything?
right,
I have no idea. That's up to you. But all that matters is that goblins can fly
yeah,
because that's
gotcha.
the truth about them. So we gave all of our monsters tenants like that, so they are as flexible as we could make them, to match the flexibility of the players.
Nice.
And then there's instructions in there to how to tailor things further if you need to and whatnot. Because you can have you can have combat where somebody is playing the god of punching people into space, you know, and like their turn comes up and they punch somebody into space, and then
Yeah,
combat is over, and that's great.
yeah,
That's a successful obstacle overcome. And this game really embraces weird stuff like that. But as the storyteller, you have to be okay with that happening because it's going to, and you're not going to be
Yeah,
able to predict when it does. So you have to just be able to run with it. This is definitely a yes and kind of game, certainly.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I just can't. I love that sort of thing. I consider myself pretty good at improvising on the spot, like making sure if I know the rules. Like D&D, I know like the back of my hand. I've got a good memory for rules and statistics and stuff. I got
Hmm.
obsessed with D&D very quickly when I first started playing it, and so I read the rules back to back. Like I read the PHB back to front. Um, I c- I remember rules really well, and so when something comes up. I tend to know how to rule it on the fly, like how to improvise around it because I feel confident
Yeah.
in that world. It's when I'm in thrust into a system that I don't know. Like when I did run the 3 shot with Pathfinder, it was lucky that I had Dag in the game as one of the players because something came up and I was like, "Is that a should I ask for a knowledge check for is that how I run these things?" And so it'll be interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to running the crown when I get it and actually like can sit down and look through it and see how to do it because then it seems like such a flexible system that stuff's going to come up that's going to really throw me for a loop. Being like, I don't know how this is meant to be ruled, but how am I going to rule it? Let's find out. Like this is how we're going to play it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like I know that when I have played the game or when I've run the game, every game for me as a storyteller has turned out different, almost like the mechanics feel different. Not just the
Right.
story being different,
Interesting.
but like the mechanics just flex to fit what the players are playing. And
Yeah.
they have to. Like if you were playing a game where all of your players can fly, they've all bought the
Yeah. Right.
Wings
Yeah.
Wonder, everybody can fly. That is a different game than if you do not have that. And getting Wings in the Crown is very easy. It does not take a lot of experience points to buy that wonder. It's
Yeah.
really low because we wanted you to have it.
You ready to
We
have
want you to have as
it?
much of this
Flying's
cool
fun.
stuff as you want. Yeah, flying is super fun. And like different movement types don't necessarily like really change the game. They don't change the
Mm.
reality of the game in any major capacity. A storyteller is always gonna like you're never gonna be playing D&D and the only way to solve this is if everyone in the party can fly. You're just not gonna have that because like the dungeon master doesn't want to do that. The players don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So like things like that have joyful impact on the game because
Hmm.
players want to have wings, want to be able to fly, and that's crazy fun for them to do.
Yeah.
And the game will flex around to being able to have all of those things like that. So I have yet to run a game that has felt like running any other game. They all kind of come out just a little different. You kind of learn how the characters are playing their purviews and how they're playing their gods.
Yeah.
And even if somebody had the same purview, like an identical purview, you have a god of fire and you have a god of fire, they're going to play it differently.
Yeah.
Even
Right.
if even if all of their background stuff is fine, they're just going to think about how it works
Yeah.
differently, and you'll have to
Yeah.
make adjustments for that. And so we couldn't write rules for that, but we wrote like a bunch of guidelines.
Guidelines for it, yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I find that with any TTRPG really, even like quite crunchy ones. Like I've said before, like when people are creating characters for D&D games, they'll be like, "Oh, we've got a wizard in the party, so I guess I'll not play a wizard." And I'm saying, like, if you want to play a wizard, play a wizard. Like, I could run a very unique story for a party of 5 wizards. Not only
yeah,
because you've got different races and different backgrounds and different subclasses, but even if I had a party of 5 wizards who were all human and all took the same subclass, you were all evocation wizards, you would make very different characters. You'd make very different choices. You'd choose different evocation spells. You'd use those in different ways. You'd be able to, like, it would
yeah.
be obviously the story would become about you guys at a wizard school or something. Like, you would like make a reason for those to be existing.
Mhm.
But with any role playing game, you can find the role in the gaps that are like no matter how crunchy a system is, even Pathfinder 1E with all of the different feats and stuff, there are gaps that aren't accounted for, like with around the lines, as it were, reading between the lines, as it were. There are gaps in your characters that isn't hasn't got some mechanic to it, and that's where your flavor is going to come through. That's where the
Yeah,
the the feeling of the character is going to come through.
yeah, 100%. Completely agree with that.
We had a question come in from Pixies and Pins saying, "What's the part of the game that you are the most proud of?"
Um, how complete it is. Which is maybe a bit of a throwaway answer, but honestly, I'm really good at doing things to like 80%
Yeah.
completion and then moving on. And so the
Yeah.
fact that this has
I get
made
that.
it to where it is and the fact that we're almost done, like that feels incredible to me.
Yeah.
Um, but but if you're talking about like just a portion of the game, I love the I really love the wonders and
Mm.
how they function and the freedom for customization that that gives to all of our players. They were also the most fun thing to write because it was just like come up with a weird thing that you might want to do,
Yeah.
you know, like
Yeah.
have wings or hover or whatever. Like Dag played one of our games, and he played the God of Laziness,
Yeah.
and he took hover as a wonder, which just lets you hover off the ground, and he just tied a rope to himself and made everyone pull him around like a kite. Um, and that was a choice, and it fit his purview perfectly, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but they're just so much fun to write. Those are really the ones where I will like write down a name first because I like the sound of
Mm-hmm.
something, and then come back and figure out
Be
how
like,
that
what is
fits
that gonna
mechanically into the
do?
game. Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
Cinderfingers asked, when playing a rules-heavy game, finding loopholes, is it cool or uncool? If you're playing a rules-heavy game, is it cool to find loopholes within those rules-heavy games?
I
I,
I
th-
think it's
I
I
think
think
it's a
it's
nature
cool.
of it. Yeah, I think it's within the
Yeah,
nature of the game. Like that's part. Like if you're the whole point of a rules heavy game is that it's kind of like a battle of like a not a battle of attrition, like what do they call it, an arms race, where you know
yeah,
I've got a sword, so I'm going to develop better armor, and then I've got armor piercing bullets, so I'm going to create Kevlar. Like you're
yeah,
gonna always have that. So in the rules heavy games, they are so rules heavy because they've tried to cut this loophole, and they've tried to cover this loophole, and then if you can still find loopholes within that, I think that's cool. I think well done, you've done it. You've found
yeah.
ways
I
to
think
use it.
I totally agree. I totally agree. Like if you are playing a game that has gone to that trouble to try and regulate you that hard,
Mm,
if you can find something that they missed, congratulations. Like
yeah,
you've done a really good job.
and you get rewarded
Like
with like,
hopefully,
yeah, you found a combination of things that actually works together to make it
yeah,
super powerful. Well done.
and hopefully you're keeping like the intent of everything
Yeah,
there. You know, there's definitely some like definitely kind of busted things that are going to happen, but it's almost as much fun to point out how broken it is and then not abuse it than anything else. You know, be like, oh, I could do
I
this,
could do this.
but I won't.
It's also, yeah, I think that's one of the important skills to learn as a game master of any kind is like if your players find those things and go, wow, look, this is exploitable, and then they exploit it at every opportunity for to solve any combat, non-combat, anything at all. You need to have the skill to go, hey, well done, you did it. Here's a sticker. You found a way to break the game. I'm going to fix that loophole now. I'm going to patch it because this is
Yeah,
making it less fun for everybody else. Um, so to acknowledge that yes, you did it, well done, but for the sake of the fun of the game, I think just in general, advice for GMs is like don't be afraid to have a meta conversation with players about the game itself. Like you don't need to be worried at a table to break the fourth wall and be like, hey guys, talking to you as players now. I'm feeling like this game isn't as fun as it could be because of X, Y, Z, and you know you can work together as a friends to fix that. So yeah, when you do find an exploitable rule, super fun and super cool to do, and if it then breaks the game for the other players at the table or even for yourself, acknowledge that you found it and then don't use it. Rafe asked, I heard you met at Gen Con. Do you have any plans to do any other cons in any other countries? What is your con experience?
I love conventions.
Yeah,
I have only recently started going to them in a non work capacity, or at least having time outside of
right.
regular work to enjoy the convention
Yeah.
and meet new people. And it's a blast. I wish I'd been doing it for years. Um, so I think this upcoming year we're definitely going to be doing GaryCon. I think will be our first
Mm,
one. We're definitely going to be doing Gen Con again. If all goes according to plan, we will likely get down to PAX Australia. That's what we're planning on.
Let's hope.
That might
Let's
be
hope.
good. Yeah. Um, yeah, and then you know, I'm based in Seattle, so going PAX here as well
Nice,
is
yeah. Yeah,
always good.
I'd love to check out all the other PAXs at some point. So I've been very relatively new to conventions at all. I did Armageddon in Auckland, which is like a tiny little thing. You can walk around it in half a day and be like, yeah, that's done. And then I did PAX Australia last year, which was fantastic and a big sort of eye-opening to bigger conventions. Then I did Gen Con this year, which was even bigger step up, like 20,000 registered events, like 75,000 people went or something.
Yeah,
And then
it was its
back to
biggest
PAX
ever.
Australia again this year. What was that?
It was its biggest ever Gen Con
Oh, really? Was it?
this year. Yeah,
Oh
it was the
wow,
biggest
no,
ever.
no wonder it felt so huge and overwhelming. There was at one point
It was big.
I was in one seminar and I wanted to get to another panel that started at like on the hour or something, and I was like, I better set off now. I better set off like 5 minutes early, and it took me 15 minutes at like a power walk to get from one end of this like convention center to the other. Because it's just over the years sprawled out to just like some sort of consuming blob, just absorbed all of the nearby buildings. It's now got like the sports stadium as well as the convention hall, and then a bunch of different like uh, hotels just around this convention hall have also got absorbed into it now. And there's just things going on
Yeah.
at all times of the day, and you can't possibly go to everything that you want to go to. It was incredibly huge, and I would love to go again, knowing that now, like being more prepared
Hmm.
mentally for what it is. Um, for me, I'd love to just convention hop throughout the year. It's just like who's got the expenses to do that. I'm definitely
Yeah.
going to try to get to GaryCon if I can because it's the 50th anniversary of D&D, and there's a few people I know that go to GaryCon that I haven't met in person yet. So GaryCon would be a good one. Gen Con would be great to go to again next year. PAX Australia, I'm probably going to go to every year just because it's so close to New Zealand and I can actually get there for relatively cheap. Um, all of the other PAXs I'd love to get to at some point. There's some in the UK that I'd love to get to and do some like Europe hopping from around there. Who's who's got the money? Who's got the money for doing it? I would love to be a professional convention goer for a living.
Yeah. That would be great. That's the
Uh,
dream.
a question came in from Nightmare as well. It says, as DMs, when a simple battle is going smooth in the way it could be kind of boring at some point for the players, as a DM, do you guys add something to wake up the players, like adding in a creativity wall to beat the battle, or not telling them, of course, but an improvised mechanic? Do you change things on the fly during a fight or during a battle or a combat or something? Absolutely, yeah. I mean, changing things on the fly is one of the biggest skills that you're going to need to develop as a game master of any kind, not even just in D&D. But like, if something is going boring for the players, being able to change something in and make out like it was that way, it was intended that way all along, is a fantastic
Yeah.
way to do it. Also, a huge thing is not telling your players ever, like not telling them after the game either. Like just keep it because it's like to let people see behind the curtain, to let them see how the sausage is made, as it were. Um, it can really diminish not only their enjoyment uh, posthumously or post hoc, like they can look back on it and go, ah, they changed that after the fact. But in future sessions, when something happens again, even if it was planned, they're always going to have in the back of their mind of, ah, they're just making this up to, they're just bringing this out to begin with. Um, I found that advice from I think XP to level 3 when they talked about fudging dice, and they were like, "Nah,
Mm.
never fudge dice. I never fudge dice." In the video, they were being quite clear about like saying they never fudge dice. Like even if you're fudging the dice, you never fudge the dice because it helps to keep that illusion, and the illusion is part of the enjoyment of it. I think. All right. Well, I think we are pretty much out of time then, so I will ask one last question. Oh, Joe Baby's got a question, and then I've got one of my own as well. Joe Baby just put in a question. If you could pick any four people from the TTRPG community to play a game with, who would you pick? Ooh, very good question. Let's make it around the crown as well. Like if for people, if you were running a game of the crown and you could have four players, any players at all, who do you think would be fantastic players to introduce to your game?
It's a hard question.
Hmm.
I've got to play with a lot of people that I really respect
Yeah.
as players and gamers and designers and everything like that. I've been very fortunate for that. But I would love to have Matt Lillard at the
Oh
table.
yeah, yeah.
I worked on one of his movies a long time ago, and we got to talk about D&D the whole time, which was cool.
Nice.
Um, but I've never played with him or anything like that. I think he would be great at the table.
Yeah, yeah. He seems like I don't know him, but from his work, he seems like he'd be a very fun guy. Yeah, I think just anyone that's proven themselves to be super like creative and on the spot thinkers, improvisers and stuff. Brennan Lee Mulligan would be on my wish
Hmm.
list to have at a table one day. Yeah, a bunch of the Critical Role cast and stuff are all fantastic
Hmm.
improvisers and very good storytellers. They've got a good ear and just an instinct for timing. I think is a very important thing at tables. I think as well when it comes to TTRPGs, the ability to shut the fuck up and when it's not when the camera's not on you, as it were. I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people don't have. Like some people are very funny and very good improvisers, but are way too much like needing to be in the limelight all the time for it to make a good party. I think the ability that really shines when you've got a large group like Critical Role, when there's like 8, 9 people at the table sometimes they're going for 20, 30, 40 minutes of just sitting there not being in the scene and they're just giving that opportunity. They're just generously giving that to the people who are in the scene to just be like, look, this is your time. Like have your little role play moment of like your romance or whatever is going on. I think those things are really important skills to have at like a successful fun table. So yeah, lots of people, I reckon. And thankfully, I'm in an industry where I've had, like you say, like I've had the opportunity to play with a bunch of people that I already respect greatly as fantastic storytellers.
Yeah.
Um, the last question I have then, on behalf of my editor, um, because as we were talking about before the stream, you've got to you don't possibly have the time to be making fresh content for every single different platform. So we like to take a snippet of the short rests to put out on YouTube and TikTok and things. So in 1 minute or less, ideally, so that we can put it out as a YouTube short. Um, can you explain how you let's make it uh, when you have such a system of flexibility around creating a god of something super powerful and super general or a god of something super niche, how do you balance that in a party?
Yeah, it's for the crown at least, it comes down to the resource pool that everybody is pulling from. Those are inherently equal for all of the people that are at the table. And so beyond that, it comes down to how the individual player chooses to use their purview to impact the world around them. And one of the things that we have found with all of our playtesting is that the people that have chosen to play some broad, expansive, huge power have less opportunity to use it in fun, clever ways at the table. And so the people that choose something a little more fun and a little more um, like dialed in, a little more down to earth, maybe like
Hmm.
bubblegum or shoes or whatever,
Hmm.
they
Post-it
have
notes.
more opportunity in front of them for enjoyment and fun. So a lot of this stuff kind of self balances already mechanically in the game, and then
Hmm.
just like how you interact with the world around you.
Wonderful. A lot of work gone into balancing it well, and I think you've pulled it off really well.
Yeah, thanks. It was hard.
Excellent. Well, we'll leave it there then. So where can people find you? Where can people find the work you've been doing, and where can people follow for news when it goes live, when they can actually start playing it themselves?
Yeah, so most of our socials are up on our website, which is formerlyferalgames.com. But if you're looking for us on Twitter or X or whatever we're supposed to be calling it, we are at formerly_feral. I'm also on Blue Sky, formerly feral games, and all of those things. And then we're on Instagram at the Crowned RPG. And so that's where most of our updates go out through Twitter and Instagram there. And we update pretty often with how things are going. And then once the book heads to print, our Discord server will be open to the public as well. It's been Kickstarter only at this point, so
Nice.
we'll have updates there too.
Very cool. And if this is your first time seeing me, I'm Robert Hartley, GM. I'm not normally this sick, hopefully. You can find me all over the internet at Robert Hartley, GM. I'm also the Dungeon Master for a comedy group called Viva la Dirt League, so you can find us on YouTube at Viva la Dirt League D&D. I look forward to seeing you around the community some more. Brings us to the end of our short rest. I've rolled a few hit dice. We've had a few drinks. We're going to snuff out this campfire and get back to our questing. Uh, is there anyone online that you would like to raid? I always like to give it the option to my guest. Otherwise, I will find somebody on Twitch to send our community off to.
Do it, do it.
Let's have a look then. Oh man, there's a lot of people online right now. We've got Legends of Avantris on. We've got Magi RPG. We've actually this is applicable. We have a streamer on right now called The Crowned DM. So let's send off just for apropos the
That's
Crowned
incredible.
DM. Let's send you off on a raid to the Crowned DM, and I will see you guys tomorrow for some. Just double check my calendar. I think it's tomorrow for some Twitch Tales interactive D&D content. If you are one of my Patreons, I'll see you later tonight for a Patreon charisma check, where I'm just going to outline and talk about all of the PAX Australia, how it went this year, and just chat about that. Otherwise, I will see you live on Twitch Details tomorrow evening, where we do some world building. So I'll see you then. Thank you very much for joining me, Damon, and I'll
Thanks
catch
for
up with
having me.
you another time. Bye, everyone.
So long, everyone.
Hey, you've reached the end. This is the part where I've got to say something funny and or witty, and so like it and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.